The executioner's axe glinted in the morning sun as Sheriff Darius Ravencroft shouldered through the jeering crowd, his badge catching light like a silver star of defiance. His voice thundered across the town square of Millbrook Falls, freezing the masked executioner mid-swing. This woman hasn't had a proper trial. The girl on the chopping block lifted her head, revealing startling violet eyes that blazed with fierce intelligence despite the dirt streaking her angular face. Her midnight black hair hung in tangles around her shoulders, and though her simple brown dress was torn and stained, she carried herself with a dignity that made Darius's breath catch. Sheriff Ravencroft sneered Judge Cornelius Grimwald from his elevated platform, his powdered wig askew with indignation. This vagrant was caught stealing bread from Morrison's bakery. Penalty for theft in Millbrook Falls is death, as you well know, death for bread. Darius stepped onto the platform, his hand resting on his Colt .45 at 32. He was the youngest sheriff the town had ever elected, but his reputation for fairness had earned him respect from everyone except the corrupt town council. When did we become savages, Judge? The crowd murmured uneasily. Many had come expecting entertainment, but Darius's intervention was turning the execution into something far more complicated. The law is the law, Grimwald blustered, though his watery eyes darted nervously toward the imposing figure of Mayor Thaddeus Blackwood, who sat like a toad on the council's bench. Then let's follow it properly, Darius replied, drawing his knife to cut the girl's bonds. Every citizen of this territory has the right to legal representation and a jury trial. When did this girl receive either? As the ropes fell away, the girl rubbed her raw wrists and looked up at Darius with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cultured despite her bedraggled appearance. "Though I fear you've made powerful enemies." "Today, already had them," Darius said grimly, helping her to her feet. "What's your name, miss?" She hesitated, something flickering in those remarkable violet eyes. Seraphina Vale." Mayor Blackwood rose from his seat, his bulk casting a shadow over the platform. "Sheriff, you overstep your authority. This woman is a known vagrant and thief." "Known by whom?" Darius challenged. "I've been sheriff here for 3 years, and I've never seen her before. Where are the witnesses? Where's the stolen merchandise?" The baker, Harold Morrison, was pushed forward by the crowd. Thizia's face was flushed with nervousness as he pointed at Seraphina. "That's her. I saw her take a whole loaf from my shop window." "When?" Darius pressed. "Yesterday, ... or was it the day before?" Morrison stammered, his story already beginning to crumble under scrutiny. Seraphina stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "I've never stolen anything in my life. I was traveling through town when these men grabbed me from the inn where I was staying. They said I was a thief, but they never explained what I supposedly stole." Darius studied her face, noting the intelligence in her eyes and the refined way she spoke. This was no common vagrant, despite her appearance. "Which in the Golden Swan," Seraphina replied promptly. "Room 7. I paid Mrs. Abernathy $2 for 3 nights' lodging." A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. Mrs. Abernathy was known as the most honest woman in town, and her inn was respectable. If this girl had been staying there and paying her way, the theft charges became even more questionable. "This is ridiculous." Judge Grimwald sputtered. "The girl is clearly lying, then let's verify her story," Darius said firmly. "Yes." "Mrs. Abernathy, are you here?" The elderly innkeeper pushed through the crowd, her face grave. "I'm here, Sheriff, and I can confirm that Miss Vale has been staying at my inn for 2 days. Paid in full she did, and never caused a moment's trouble." The crowd's mood began to shift as the flimsy case against Seraphina crumbled. Mayor Blackwood's face darkened with fury, while Judge Grimwald looked around desperately for support. "Release her, Sheriff," called out Dr. Augustus Thornfield from the crowd. "It's clear this girl is innocent." But as Darius looked into Seraphine's violet eyes, he saw something that made his heart skip a flicker of recognition that she was trying desperately to hide. Somehow, impossibly, This mysterious young woman looked familiar, and that frightened him more than Mayor Blackwood's rage ever could. The crowd dispersed with disappointed murmurs. Their appetite for public execution. Left unsatisfied, Darius escorted Seraphina through the dusty streets of Millbrook Falls, acutely aware of the hostile stares following them from every doorway and window. Mayor Blackwood's influence ran deep, and crossing him came with consequences. "You're not safe here," Darius said quietly as they approached his office, a modest wooden building that served as both jail and administrative center. "Blackwood doesn't like being made to look foolish in public." Seraphina glanced around nervously, her violet eyes taking in every detail of the town with an intensity that seemed odd for a mere traveler. "I appreciate your help, Sheriff, but I don't understand why they targeted me. I've done nothing wrong. It's what I aim to find out." Darius held the door open for her, noting how she moved with unconscious grace despite her ordeal. "Coffee? You look like you could use it." As he prepared the coffee, Darius studied her discreetly. Something about her profile nagged at him, the aristocratic tilt of her nose, the determined set of her jaw, the way she held her head even in distress. It was like looking at a half-remembered dream. "Sheriff," Seraphina said suddenly, "how long have you lived in Millbrook Falls?" "Born here," Darius replied, surprised by the question. "Why?" She wrapped her hands around the steaming coffee cup, her knuckles white with tension. "And you've never left? Not even for a short time?" "Spent 2 years back east getting educated, came back when my father died and left me his ranch." Darius sat across from her, his lawman's instincts prickling. "Miss Vale, why do I get the feeling you're not telling me everything?" Before she could answer, the office door burst open and Deputy Marshal Ezekiel Stone strode in, his federal badge gleaming on his black vest. Behind him came Mrs. Cordelia Fairweather, the town's most prominent widow and gossip, her face flushed with excitement. "Sheriff Ravencroft," Stone announced formally, "I need to speak with you about the prisoner." "She's not a prisoner," Darius replied firmly. "The charges were false. Nevertheless, there are questions about her identity that need answering." Stone's pale eyes fixed on Seraphina with uncomfortable intensity. "Miss Vale, if that is indeed your real name, where exactly did you come from?" Seraphine's cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. "I don't see how that's relevant to false theft charges." Mrs. Fairweather could contain herself no longer. "Sheriff, there's something you need to know about this girl. Something that changes everything," Cordelia, Darius warned. "If you're here to spread more gossip, it's not gossip," the widow exclaimed. "I was there the night she was born. I was there when Margaret Ravencroft went into labor during that terrible snowstorm 23 years ago." The words hit Darius like a physical blow. He stared at Seraphina, seeing past the dirt and exhaustion to the bone structure beneath. The violet eyes that had seemed so familiar because they were identical to his own. The midnight hair that matched what he saw in the mirror every morning. "No," he whispered, his world tilting on its axis. Seraphine's face had gone white as snow. "Mrs. Fairweather, please, Margaret Ravencroft gave birth to twins that night." Mrs. Fairweather continued relentlessly. "A boy and a girl. But the girl was sickly, barely breathing. Doctor said she wouldn't survive the night. So Margaret gave her to the traveling preacher and his wife who were passing through. Said it would be kinder than watching her die slowly." Marshal Stone leaned forward intently. "Are you saying this woman is Sheriff Ravencroft's sister?" "I'm saying," Mrs. Fairweather declared triumphantly, "that this girl is Seraphina Ravencroft, daughter of this town, presumed dead for 23 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Darius stared across the desk at the woman who had been a stranger 5 minutes ago and was now, impossibly, his twin sister. Seraphina, his sister, stared back with tears streaming down her face. "Didn't know how to tell you," she whispered. "I came back to find my family, to find where I belonged. But when I saw you wearing our father's badge, looking so much like me..." She broke off, sobbing. "The preacher's name," Darius said hoarsely. "What was the preacher's name?" "Vale," Mrs. Fairweather said softly. "Reverend Joshua Vale and his wife Mary. They were heading west to establish a mission." Everything fell into place. The familiar features, the cultured speech despite her rough appearance, the way she'd looked. At the town, as if memorizing every detail. Seraphina had come home at last, only to nearly lose her life to the corruption that had taken root in her absence. Sister, Darius said wonderingly, the word feeling strange on his tongue. Brother, Serafina replied through her tears. But their reunion was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats and angry voices. Through the window, Darius could see Mayor Blackwood leading a group of armed men toward the jail. The family reunion would have to wait. First, they had to survive the night. They're coming for her, Deputy Marshal Stone observed grimly, peering through the jail's front window as Mayor Blackwood's mob gathered in the street. Blackwood's got half the town council with him, plus some hired guns I don't recognize. Darius checked his rifle, his mind racing. Mrs. Fairweather, get out the back way. Now this is about to get ugly. I will not, the elderly woman declared, with surprising steel in her voice. That girl is a Ravencroft, and I helped bring her into this world. I'm not abandoning her now. Serafina stood near the window, her violet eyes reflecting the torchlight from the street. Why does Blackwood want me dead so badly? I've been in town less than 3 days, Darius said slowly, pieces clicking into place in his mind. You're not just my sister. You're the rightful heir to half the Ravencroft estate, including the land Blackwood's been trying to steal through fraudulent tax claims. The truth hit like lightning. When their parents died in a wagon accident 5 years ago, the will had left everything to Darius Ravencroft and his heirs. Everyone assumed that meant future children, but legally, a twin sister would have equal claim to the property. Land worth how much? Stone asked. About 50,000 acres of prime cattle country, plus water rights to Mill Creek. Arius's jaw tightened. Blackwood's been circling like a vulture, claiming I owed back taxes that don't exist, trying to force me to sell. And if he thought you were the only heir, Serafina said quietly, he just had to eliminate you. But now, ... No. He has to eliminate both of us, Darius finished grimly. The mob outside had grown larger, their voices rising in anger. The window, they could see torches being lit and weapons being brandished. Sheriff Ravencroft, Mayor Blackwood's voice boomed across the square. Send out the prisoner. Justice must be served. She's not a prisoner, Darius shouted back. And she's committed no crime. She's a vagrant and a liar. The people demand justice. Mrs. Fairweather snorted with disgust. Justice. That fat toad wouldn't know justice if it bit him on his considerable posterior. Deputy Stone checked his own weapons. Sheriff, I've got federal authority here, but there's only 3 of us against 30 of them. Maybe we should consider negotiating. No negotiations, Serafina said firmly, surprising them all. She had found an old coat and cleaned her face, and now looked every inch a Ravencroft, proud, stubborn, and ready for a fight. I didn't survive 23 years in exile to be murdered by corrupt politicians. That's my sister, Darius said with fierce pride. We Ravencrofts don't back down from bullies. The sound of breaking glass came from the rear of the building. Blackwood's men were trying to surround them, using the mob as a distraction, while others attacked from behind. Stone, watch the front, Darius ordered. Mrs. Fairweather, get behind the desk. Serafina, I can shoot, his sister said calmly, picking up a spare rifle from the gun rack. Reverend Vale believed in practical education for young ladies. First shots came through the back door as Blackwood's hired guns tried to force their way in. Darius returned fire, his bullets splintering the door frame and sending the attackers diving for cover. This is Deputy U.S. Marshal Stone, Stone bellowed from the front window. You men are interfering with federal business. Disperse immediately or face federal charges. His warning was answered with a hail of bullets that shattered the remaining windows and sent everyone diving for cover in the chaos that followed. Darius found himself fighting side by side with the sister he'd never known he had. Serafina proved to be an excellent shot, her rifle cracking with deadly precision as she picked off attackers trying to climb through the broken windows. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Darius asked, during a brief lull in the gunfire. California. Mining camp, Serafina replied, reloading with practiced efficiency. The Vales died when I was 16. I'd defend for myself after that. The revelation that his sister had spent 7 years surviving alone in the rough mining territories filled Darius with a mixture of pride and sadness. She'd endured hardships he couldn't imagine, all while he'd been safe in their hometown, never knowing she existed. "Listen," Mrs. Fairweather hissed. The shooting stopped. An ominous silence had fallen over the street. Through the smoke and broken glass, they could see torches moving, but the mob seemed to be retreating. "Maybe they gave up," Stone suggested hopefully. But Darius's blood ran cold as he smelled smoke that wasn't from gunpowder. "No," he said grimly. "They're going to burn us out." Orange light began flickering at the edges of the windows as Blackwood's men set fire to the building's wooden walls. The trap was closing. They had only minutes before the jail became their funeral pyre. Smoke began seeping through the floorboards as flames licked at the jail's exterior walls. Darius grabbed a water bucket, knowing it was futile, but unable to stand idle while his sister faced death by fire. "There," Serafina pointed toward a loose floorboard near the back corner. "I noticed it earlier. There's a gap wide enough to crawl through." Deputy Stone knelt and pried at the board with his knife. "It's the old root cellar. Building was constructed over it when the jail was built." "Mrs. Fairweather first," Darius ordered, helping the elderly woman toward the opening. "Then Serafina." "Not leaving you too," Serafina began. "That's an order from your sheriff and your brother," Darius said firmly. "Stone and I will be right behind you." As the women disappeared into the dark space below, the heat grew intense enough to singe their eyebrows. Stone followed quickly. Leaving Darius to grab what weapons and ammunition he could carry, the root cellar was cramped and dank. But it connected to a tunnel that led toward the town's original well. They crawled through darkness, guided only by Stone's matches, while above them, the jail burned like a Viking funeral pyre. "There," Mrs. Fairweather whispered, pointing toward a glimmer of starlight. "The old well shaft." They emerged behind Morrison's bakery, covered in dirt and ash, but alive. The entire town square was illuminated by the burning jail. They could see Blackwood's mob celebrating their supposed victory. "We need horses," Darius said quietly, "and we need them now." "The livery." "Stables on the far side of town," Stone observed. "We'll never make it without being seen." "Yes, we will," Serafina said with quiet confidence, "because they think we're dead. And dead people don't need to sneak." She was right. Moving carefully through back alleys and shadows, they made their way toward the stable, while Blackwood addressed his followers, claiming to have cleansed the town of corruption and outlaws. But their escape was complicated by an unexpected encounter. As they reached the stable, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Dr. Augustus Thornfield, the town physician, holding a medical bag and wearing a grim expression. "Going somewhere, Sheriff?" the doctor asked quietly. Darius's hand moved toward his gun, but Thornfield raised his free hand peacefully. "Relax, Darius. I'm here to help." "Help how?" Stone asked suspiciously. "By telling you that Blackwood's celebrating too early." Thornfield smiled grimly. "He doesn't know about the telegram I sent to the territorial governor this afternoon reporting suspected corruption in the town government. Federal investigators will be here by tomorrow evening." "Why are you helping us?" Serafina asked. "Because I delivered you both the night you were born," the old doctor said softly. "And because I've watched Blackwood's corruption poison this town for too long." Thornfield helped them saddle horses, his practiced hands working quickly in the darkness. "There's a line shack up in the hills, about 10 miles north. Old Jeremiah Hawthorne's place. He'll shelter you until the federal men arrive." Dr. Darius said as they prepared to ride. "Thank you." "For everything? Thank me by staying alive, both of you," Thornfield replied. "This town needs honest leadership, and the Ravencroft name means something here." They rode hard through the night, following deer trails and creek beds to avoid pursuit. Mrs. Fairweather proved to be an excellent horsewoman, keeping pace without complaint. As dawn broke over the mountains, they reached the isolated cabin where old Jeremiah Hawthorne lived with his granddaughter, Temperance. The grizzled mountain man welcomed them without question, his weathered face creasing with concern when he learned of the night's events. "Blackwood's been needing killing for years," Jeremiah declared bluntly. "Should have done it myself, but I figured the law would handle him eventually." "The law will handle him," Stone said firmly, "but it has to be done properly, through the courts." Sitting by Hawthorne's fireplace, sharing coffee and venison stew, Darius finally had a chance to really look at his sister. In the firelight, The family resemblance was unmistakable. She had their father's stubborn chin and their mother's graceful hands. "Tell me about them," Serafina said softly, following his thoughts. "Our parents? What were they like?" "Strong," Darius replied. "Honest. They would have been so proud of who you became. Even though I lived in mining camps and learned to shoot." "Men, especially because of that," Darius said firmly. "Survival takes courage, and courage is what makes a true Ravencroft." Outside, the morning sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and rose, but in Millbrook Falls, Darius knew. Mayor Blackwood would soon discover that his enemies had escaped his trap. The real battle for their town and their family legacy was about to begin. Federal Marshal Harrison Crane arrived in Millbrook Falls. At sunset, his weathered face grim as he surveyed the smoking ruins of the jail. Behind him rode 6 deputies, all armed and ready for trouble. Mayor Blackwood had been expecting congratulations for cleansing his town of corruption. But the badges and federal warrants changed everything. Marshal Crane, Blackwood blustered, his bulk straining his vest as he hurried forward. "What brings the federal government to our peaceful community? Reports of attempted murder, arson, and abuse of authority." Crane replied coldly. "Where is Sheriff Ravencroft?" "Dead, I'm afraid," Blackwood said with false regret. "Killed in a fire while resisting arrest." A tragic end for a lawman who'd lost his way. Up in the mountain cabin, Darius watched through field glasses as the federal marshals took control of the town. "It's time," he told the others. "Crane's an honest man. We can trust him." The ride back to Millbrook Falls felt like a homecoming and a reckoning all at once. Serafina rode beside her brother, no longer the bedraggled prisoner on the execution block, but a woman reclaiming her birthright. Mrs. Fairweather had found her a proper dress and helped arrange her midnight hair, revealing the aristocratic beauty that had been hidden beneath dirt and desperation. The whole town's watching, Deputy Stone observed as they approached the main street. Indeed, faces filled every window and doorway. Citizens stunned to see their sheriff alive and accompanied by the mysterious woman who had nearly been executed that morning. But it was the expression on Mayor Blackwood's face that made the ride worthwhile, pure terror as his lies crumbled around him. "Sheriff Ravencroft," Marshal Crane said formally, though his relief was evident. "Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and arson," Darius replied, dismounting beside the federal officer. "Plus theft of public funds and land fraud dating back at least 5 years. These are serious charges," Crane said. "Do you have evidence?" "Do." Dr. Thornfield stepped forward, carrying a leather satchel. "Financial records, forged documents, correspondence between Blackwood and known criminals. I've been collecting evidence for months." Blackwood's face went from pale to purple. "This is ridiculous. Thornfield is clearly in league with these criminals." "These criminals?" Crane asked mildly, his eyes moving to Serafina. "Marshal Crane," Mrs. Fairweather said proudly, "may I present Miss Serafina Ravencroft, rightful daughter of Millbrook Falls and owner of the Ravencroft estate." The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs. Many remembered the story of the Ravencroft twins, one of whom had been given away as a baby. Now she stood before them, alive and beautiful, her violet eyes blazing with quiet dignity. "Impossible," Judge Grimwald stammered. "The girl died as an infant." "I assure you," Serafina said clearly, her cultured voice carrying across the square, "reports of my death were greatly exaggerated." Marshal Crane studied the assembled evidence, while his deputies kept weapons trained on Blackwood's supporters. The case was overwhelming: years of corruption, theft, and abuse of power documented in meticulous detail. Mayor Blackwood, Crane announced formally, "You are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder, and violation of federal law." Judge Grimwald, "You are also under arrest as an accessory." "You can't do this," Blackwood roared. "I have rights, have influence." "You have the right to a fair trial," Crane replied calmly. "More than you were willing to give Miss Ravencroft." As federal deputies led the corrupt officials away in chains, the townspeople began to cheer. Many who had been intimidated into silence finally felt free to speak out against the corruption that had plagued their community. "What happens now?" Temperance Hawthorne asked. She had ridden down from the mountain cabin with them, her young face bright with excitement at the adventure. Now, Darius said, looking at his sister with pride, we rebuild together. Serafina smiled, the first truly joyful expression he'd seen from her. Together, she agreed, the way it should have been from the beginning. As the sun set over Millbrook Falls, painting the mountains in familiar shades of gold and purple, the Ravencroft twins stood side by side on the porch of their family's ranch house. They had worked to rebuilding trust in the law, restoring their town's reputation, and healing the wounds left by years of corruption, but they would do it together, as family, as partners in the legacy their parents had left them. Sheriff Marshall Crane said, approaching with his final report. The federal government is satisfied with your handling of this situation. The town council has unanimously voted to confirm you as sheriff for another term. Actually, Darius said thoughtfully, I think it's time for a change. I nominate Deputy Marshal Stone for the position. The town needs fresh leadership. And what will you do? Crane asked. Darius looked at the vast ranch land stretching toward the horizon then. At his sister, who had survived so much to find her way home, I'll do what Ravencrofts have always done. I'll build something that lasts. 3 months after Mayor Blackwood's arrest, Millbrook Falls had transformed into a town worth its name. The corrupt officials had been tried and sentenced to lengthy prison terms, their stolen assets returned to the community treasury. Streets were cleaner, businesses thrived, and an atmosphere of hope had replaced the previous climate of fear. Serafina had taken to her role as owner of the Ravencroft Ranch with the same determination she'd shown surviving in mining camps. She could rope cattle, manage ledgers, and negotiate with buyers with equal skill, earning the respect of every rancher in the territory. Your sister's got sand, commented Tobias Weatherby, their nearest neighbor, as he and Darius watched Serafina, breaking a spirited stallion in the corral. Most Eastern ladies would have fainted at the sight of that horse. Most Eastern ladies didn't spend 7 years learning to survive in California gold country. Darius replied with pride. Seraphine's not most ladies. The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted their conversation. A lone rider was coming up the valley road, dust trailing behind his horse like a brown banner. As he drew closer, Darius recognized Deputy U.S. Marshal Ezekiel Stone, though something in his posture suggested this wasn't an official visit. I mean, Mr. Ravencroft, Stone said, dismounting with obvious nervousness. I was hoping to speak with you about a personal matter. What kind of personal matter? Darius asked, though he had a suspicion based on the way Stone's eyes kept drifting. Toward Serafina in the corral? Well, Stone cleared his throat awkwardly. I've been thinking about settling down, finding a place to put down roots instead of traveling all over the territory on federal business. And, Darius prompted, enjoying the man's discomfort. And I was wondering, as I hoped you might. What I'm trying to say is, Stone took a deep breath and started over. I'd like permission to court your sister. Tobias Weatherby chuckled. About time someone worked up the courage. Half the unmarried men in 3 counties have been riding past your ranch, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous Serafina Ravencroft. Darius studied Stone carefully. The deputy marshal was a good manonist, capable and brave enough to stand with them during the corruption crisis. More importantly, he'd treated Serafina with respect from their first meeting, seeing her intelligence and strength rather than just her beauty and inheritance. You've spoken to Serafina about this? Darius asked. Not yet, Stone admitted. Wanted to approach you first, proper-like. Ezekiel Darius said seriously, my sister survived 23 years without family protection. She's proven she can take care of herself and make her own decisions. If you want to court her, you ask her, not me. Stone's face brightened. You mean you approve? I trust her judgment, Darius corrected. But for what it's worth, I think you're a good man. Just remember she's a Ravencroft. We're not easy people to live with. At that moment, Serafina vaulted over the corral fence with athletic grace, leading the no-gentle stallion behind her. Her violet eyes sparkled with satisfaction as she approached the group of men. Gentlemen, she said cheerfully, I trust you're not standing around gossiping like old women. Actually, Stone said, finding his courage at last, I came to ask if you'd do me the honor of accompanying me to the church social this Saturday evening. Serafina paused, studying his face with the careful attention she gave to everything. Important. Are you asking me to step out with you, Deputy Stone? Yes, ma'am, I am, Stone replied honestly. I know I'm just a lawman without much to offer a lady like you, but a lady like me. Serafina interrupted softly, values character over wealth, courage over comfort, and honesty over flattery. Dan, Mr. Stone, I'd be honored to attend the social with you. Stone's grin could have lit up the entire valley. Thank you, Miss Ravencroft. I promise you won't regret it. I'm sure I won't, Serafina replied warmly. But call me Serafina. We've been through too much together for formality. Stone rode away, practically glowing with happiness. Tobias Weatherby nudged Darius. Think they'll make a match of it? At them, Darius said, watching as Serafina stood in the yard, following Stone's retreating figure with her eyes. I'd say it's already made. That evening, as brother and sister sat on the porch of their family home, sharing coffee and watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant colors, Darius felt a contentment he'd never known before. Are you happy here? He asked Serafina. Really happy? Happier than I've ever been, she replied honestly. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I belong. Even with Stone courting you, Serafin's laugh was like silver. Bells, especially with Stone courting me. He's a good man, Darius. The kind of man who sees a partner, not property. Like father saw mother, Darius said softly. Like father saw mother, Serafina agreed, as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Both siblings knew they had found something precious, not just each other, but a future filled with the kind of love and partnership that made life worth 6 months later. On a perfect spring morning that painted the mountains in shades of emerald and gold, Millbrook Falls prepared for the wedding of the year. Serafina Ravencroft, the town's lost daughter who had returned from the dead, was marrying Deputy U.S. Marshal Ezekiel Stone, a federal lawman who had helped save their community from corruption. The entire town turned out for the celebration, transforming the main street into a festival of flowers, bunting, joy. Mrs. Cordelia Fairweather had organized the women into decorating committees, while the men constructed a dance platform in the town square, large enough for half the territory. To celebrate, nervous? Darius asked his sister as he helped her into their mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved and altered to fit Serafin's slender frame. Terrified, Serafina admitted with a laugh. Not about marrying Ezekiel alive, never been more certain of anything in my life, but about standing in front of the entire town, being the center of attention. You'll be fine, Darius assured her. Adjusting the delicate lace veil that had crowned 3 generations of Ravencroft brides, you faced down an executioner's block with courage. A wedding should be easy by comparison. Dr. Augustus Thornfield knocked gently on the door. Time to go, my dear. Your groom is pacing a hole in the church floor. The walk to the church felt like a triumphant parade. Townspeople lined the streets, throwing flower petals and calling out blessings. Children ran alongside the wedding party, their laughter mixing with the church bells that had been ringing since dawn inside the small white church. Ezekiel Stone waited at the altar in his best suit, his usually calm demeanor betrayed by the nervous way he kept adjusting his collar. When Serafina appeared in the doorway on her brother's arm, his face lit up with such pure joy that several women in the congregation began weeping. Pastor Jeremiah Whitmore, the circuit preacher who had performed Darius and Seraphine's parents' wedding 25 years earlier, smiled as he opened his Bible. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the joining of 2 hearts that have found their perfect match. As the ceremony proceeded, Darius felt his own eyes growing misty. His sister, who had survived abandonment, hardship, and near death, was finally getting the happiness she deserved.